There's something most people will never tell you about control. They'll say it's about being strong, about standing your ground, about fighting back harder. But what if I told you that the people who seem to have the most power over others are actually the ones who are completely powerless inside? Carl Jung discovered something that changed everything. He realized that every single person who has ever controlled you, manipulated you, or made you feel small was only able to do so because of something you didn't know about yourself. And once you understand this one thing, no one will ever be able to control you again. Think about it. Why do some people seem immune to manipulation while others get pulled into drama, toxic relationships, and power games over and over again? Why do certain people make you feel anxious just by walking into the room, while others leave you completely unaffected? The answer isn't what you think. It's not about becoming tougher or building walls. It's about something far more powerful, something hiding in plain sight. But here's the problem. Most people spend their entire lives running from this truth because it requires them to look at something they'd rather ignore. They'd rather blame others for controlling them than discover why they're so easy to control in the first place. Are you ready to find out what Jung knew that most people never will? Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone made you angry? Really think about it. Maybe it was your boss dismissing your ideas, a friend betraying your trust, or someone on social media saying something that got under your skin. Here's what really happened in that moment. They didn't make you angry. They found the invisible strings attached to you and pulled them. Carl Jung understood something revolutionary about human nature. He said that we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. Every reaction you have to another person is actually a reaction to something inside yourself. But most people live their entire lives believing they're victims of other people's behavior. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and they're furious for hours. A coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment, and it ruins their whole day. Their ex sends a text, and suddenly they're spiraling into old patterns of doubt and insecurity. Here's the truth Jung wanted you to know. People can only control you through the parts of yourself you haven't integrated yet. Every button they push, every trigger they activate, every way they manipulate you is only possible because there's something in your unconscious mind that resonates with their energy. Think about it like this. If someone calls you stupid and you feel nothing, they have no power. But if someone calls you stupid and you feel rage or shame, they've found a wound. They've located a part of you that believes, even unconsciously, that you might be inadequate. This is why two people can deal with the exact same manipulative person and have completely different experiences. One person sees right through the manipulation and remains unaffected. The other gets caught in the web, reacting, defending, trying to prove themselves. The difference? The first person has integrated the parts of themselves that the manipulator is trying to exploit. The second person is still carrying unconscious wounds that make them vulnerable. Jung called this shadow work, the process of making conscious everything you've pushed into your unconscious mind. Your fears, your insecurities, your unprocessed emotions, your disowned parts. And here's where it gets interesting. The people who control you aren't your enemies. They're your teachers. They're showing you exactly where your unconscious wounds are. They're revealing the parts of yourself you need to integrate to become truly free. But most people miss this completely. Instead of using manipulation as a mirror to see their own unconscious patterns, they just react. They get angry, they fight back, they try to control the controller. And in doing so, they give away even more power. What if there was a different way? What if instead of being a victim of manipulation, you could use it as a pathway to complete psychological freedom? Here's a different approach you can take that will change how you see every manipulative person in your life. They're not powerful. They're terrified. Jung knew that people who need to control others are actually the most out of control inside. They manipulate because they're desperate. They manipulate because deep down, they feel powerless, insignificant, and afraid. Think about the classic manipulator. Maybe it's the boss who micromanages everything, the partner who guilt trips you into staying, or the friend who always makes everything about them. What are they really doing? They're trying to create external control because they have no internal control. But here's the secret they don't want you to know. Their power over you is completely dependent on your reaction. The moment you stop reacting, their power disappears. It's like a magician. The magic only works if the audience believes it's real. The moment you see how the trick is done, the illusion is broken forever. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone is trying to make you feel guilty about setting a boundary. They're using phrases like, "you're being selfish," or "you don't care about anyone but yourself." Most people will either cave in and abandon their boundary, or get defensive and try to justify their position. Both responses give the manipulator power, because both responses show that their words have affected you. But what if you simply observed what they were doing without reacting? What if you recognize that their guilt tripping is actually revealing their own desperation to control the situation because they can't handle your boundary? Suddenly, instead of feeling guilty or defensive, you might even feel compassion. You see them clearly, not as a powerful controller, but as someone who's so afraid of not getting their way that they're willing to manipulate others. And here's the beautiful part. Once you see manipulation for what it really is, a desperate attempt to create external control because of internal chaos, it loses all power over you. Jung understood this deeply. He knew that every person we encounter is either expressing their highest self or crying out from their wounded self. Manipulators are always crying out from their wounds. They're showing you their pain, their fear, their sense of powerlessness. This doesn't mean you have to tolerate their behavior. It means you can see it clearly without being affected by it. You can respond from a place of strength rather than react from a place of unconscious wounding. But how do you develop this level of clarity? How do you train yourself to see through manipulation instead of getting caught in it? That's what we're going to explore next. Carl Jung said something that most people find uncomfortable. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What does this mean? It means that as long as you have unconscious wounds, fears, and unintegrated parts of yourself, other people will be able to manipulate those parts. You'll keep attracting controllers, manipulators, and energy vampires because they're drawn to your unconscious vulnerabilities. But the moment you bring these unconscious patterns into the light of awareness, everything changes. You become immune to manipulation, not because you build walls, but because there's nothing inside you for the manipulation to attach to. So how do you do this integration work? How do you make the unconscious conscious? First, you have to understand that every emotional trigger is a gift. I know that sounds crazy when someone is pushing your buttons, but stay with me. When someone makes you angry, jealous, defensive, or insecure, they're showing you exactly where your unconscious wounds are. Instead of focusing on their behavior, focus on your reaction. Ask yourself, what part of me is being activated right now? Let's say someone dismisses your opinion and you feel a surge of anger. Instead of thinking they're so disrespectful, ask yourself, what is this anger telling me about myself? Maybe you'll discover that you have an unconscious fear of not being valued. Maybe you'll realize you're still carrying a wound from childhood where your voice wasn't heard. This is gold. This is the raw material of psychological freedom. Jung called this process individuation, becoming conscious of all the parts of yourself that you've disowned or suppressed. It's about integrating your shadow, accepting your wholeness, and taking back all the power you've unconsciously given away. Here's a practical exercise. Think about someone who really gets under your skin. Someone who can manipulate you or make you react strongly. Now, instead of focusing on what they do, focus on what they represent to you. Do they remind you of someone from your past? What specific behaviors trigger you? What emotions come up? There's a difference between being invulnerable and being unreachable. Most people think that not letting others control you means becoming cold, distant, or aggressive. But Jung understood something deeper. True power isn't about building walls. It's about becoming so grounded in yourself that other people's storms can't shake your foundation. Imagine you're standing by the ocean during a powerful storm. The waves are crashing, the wind is howling, but deep underwater, there's complete stillness. The storm is real, but it only affects the surface. The depths remain calm and unmoved. This is what it means to be psychologically free. You're not denying that manipulation exists. You're not pretending that difficult people don't try to control others. You're simply operating from such a deep place of self-knowledge that their attempts can't reach you. But here's where most people get confused. They think this means becoming emotionless or disconnected. Actually, the opposite is true. When you're no longer defending unconscious wounds, you become more authentic, more present, more genuinely connected to others. Let me give you some examples of what this looks like in real life. Someone tries to guilt you into doing something you don't want to do. Instead of getting defensive or caving in, you simply say, "I understand you're disappointed, but I'm not available for that." No justification, no counter-manipulation, just clear, kind honesty. Someone attempts to provoke you with insults or criticism. Instead of taking the bait, you might respond with genuine curiosity. "It sounds like you're really frustrated about something. What's going on?" You're not reacting to their attack. You're responding to their underlying pain. Someone tries to make you jealous by talking about other people or flaunting their success. Instead of feeling threatened, you can genuinely celebrate with them or simply remain unaffected. Their attempt to create comparison has nothing to hook onto because you're not in competition with anyone. This might sound impossible right now, but Jung understood that this level of psychological freedom is available to everyone. It's not about becoming perfect or eliminating all emotions. It's about becoming conscious of your patterns and choosing your responses instead of being controlled by unconscious reactions. Here's what's really beautiful about this. When you stop being controllable, you stop attracting controllers. Like energy attracts like energy. When you're operating from a place of integrated wholeness, you naturally attract people who are also working on themselves. The manipulators, the energy vampires, the controllers, they lose interest in you because there's nothing for them to feed on. They need reactions, drama, unconscious wounds to exploit. When you don't provide these things, they move on to easier targets. But what about the people in your life who you can't simply avoid? What about family members, coworkers, or partners who have controlling tendencies? This is where the real mastery comes in. Here's something remarkable that Jung observed. When you change, the entire dynamic of your relationships changes. Not because you're trying to change other people, but because you're no longer participating in the unconscious dance that created the dysfunction in the first place. Every relationship has unconscious contracts, unspoken agreements about who plays what role. Who's the victim? Who's the rescuer? Who's the persecutor? Who controls? Who submits? Who rebels? These contracts are maintained by both people participating in the pattern. The controller needs someone to control. The victim needs someone to blame. The drama queen needs an audience. The people pleaser needs someone to please. But what happens when one person stops playing their part in the unconscious drama? The entire system has to shift. Let me give you a real example. Maybe you have a family member who always criticizes you, always finds something wrong, always makes you feel like you're not good enough. In the past, you might have defended yourself, tried to prove them wrong, or avoided them altogether. All of these responses actually maintain the dynamic. Your defensiveness confirms that their criticism has power over you. Your attempts to prove them wrong show that you need their approval. Your avoidance demonstrates that they can control your behavior. But what if you responded from complete integration? What if you could hear their criticism without being triggered because you've already faced and accepted your imperfections? You might respond with something like, "I can see you have strong feelings about this. Thanks for sharing your perspective." No defensiveness, no counterattack, no emotional charge, just acknowledgement. This completely disrupts the pattern. They can't pull you into an argument because you're not taking the bait. They can't make you feel bad because you're not giving your power away. They can't control you because there's nothing unconscious for them to manipulate. What usually happens next is fascinating. They might escalate at first, trying harder to get the old reaction. But when that doesn't work, something interesting occurs. Either they lose interest and stop the behavior, or they begin to relate to you in a more authentic way. Jung called this projection withdrawal. When you stop carrying their projections, stop being the screen onto which they project their own unconscious material, they're forced to deal with their own stuff directly. This doesn't mean they'll necessarily do the work to integrate their own shadows, but it means they can no longer use you as a way to avoid their own psychological growth. And here's the most beautiful part. Sometimes, when people can no longer relate to you through manipulation, drama, or control, they discover they can relate to you as a real person. Some of your most dysfunctional relationships might transform into genuine connections. But even if they don't change, you're free. You're no longer controlled by their moods, their opinions, their approval or disapproval. You've taken back your power not by fighting them, but by integrating the parts of yourself that made you vulnerable to their control in the first place. This is what Jung meant by individuation. It's not about becoming isolated or superior to others. It's about becoming so whole within yourself that you can relate to others from authenticity rather than from unconscious wounding. But there's one more crucial element to complete psychological freedom that most people overlook. Carl Jung discovered the ultimate secret of psychological freedom, and it's not what most people expect. The final step isn't just about becoming immune to other people's control. It's about no longer needing to control anything or anyone yourself. Think about it. Why do people try to control others? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of being hurt, rejected, abandoned, or diminished. They try to control external circumstances because they haven't learned to manage their internal experience. But what happens when you've done the integration work? When you've made the unconscious conscious? When you've accepted all parts of yourself? You no longer need to control others because you're no longer afraid of what they might do. You no longer need their approval because you approve of yourself. You no longer need them to behave a certain way because your peace doesn't depend on their behavior. This is true freedom, not the freedom to control others, but the freedom from needing to control anything. Jung understood that the people who are truly free are not those who dominate others, but those who have mastered themselves. They don't need to prove anything, win anything, or defend anything because they're already whole. And here's the paradox. When you stop needing to control anything, you become incredibly influential. People are drawn to your peace, your authenticity, your groundedness. They want to learn how you stay so calm in the storm. You become a living example that it's possible to be uncontrolled and uncontrolling. You demonstrate that true power comes from integration, not domination. So here's your challenge. For the next week, every time someone triggers you, instead of focusing on their behavior, ask yourself, what is this showing me about myself? What part of me needs integration? Use every manipulation attempt as a mirror. Use every control drama as a pathway to deeper self-knowledge. Remember, no one can control you without your unconscious participation. And the moment you make that participation conscious, you become truly free. If this resonated with you, drop a comment below and let me know what patterns you're ready to integrate. What unconscious wounds are you willing to bring into the light? And if you're ready to go deeper into this work, make sure to subscribe because we're just getting started on this journey to complete psychological freedom. The question isn't whether people will try to control you. They will. The question is, will you let them? The choice, as always, is yours.